Source.
All right, thank you for tuning in. Nice looking Monday. We live in an amazing state when you consider how much coastline we have here, right?
Yeah.
And one of the subjects that got, oh my gosh, so many people called in one time. We had a book, and it wasn't really a book in the normal, well, it was a book, but I mean, it had all the locations of the different sunken ships and pirate ships that are perhaps still out there or believed to be out there. And I think there was one, if I remember, there was one that has been set up so you can like swim over it or something. It's actually like everybody goes there, like in the Keys or something, right?
Yeah.
And there was a story of some gold. I never know what's true and what's not. It's hard to believe gold can wash up on shore. But do you remember that story in South Florida? There was a hurricane and some gold coins came washing up, and it was from some sunken pirate ship that had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. No matter how you look at it, whether you believe those stories or not, it's a fascinating topic because it's truly a part of the history of us, of human beings. There is a book I want to tell you about and let you hear it from the author. The book is called Black Flags, Blue Waters. It is written by our guest, Eric J. Dolin. And I just looked at the what do you call the Amazon listing, right? Let's see, where was it? I think it was number 5. Number 5 right now.
That's amazing.
Number 5. So that's pretty impressive. Eric, good morning, Eric. Thank you for being on the show with us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Where are you?
I am in Marblehead, Massachusetts, about 20 miles north of Boston.
So tell me about the book. The Epic History of America's Most Notorious Pirates is the subtitle.
Yeah, it covers the golden age of piracy, which wasn't so golden for the people being plundered by the pirates, but it's basically from the late 1600s through the mid 1720s when thousands of pirates were sailing the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. Before 1700, the book focuses on the buccaneers like Henry Morgan, who you know in the Caribbean, but also it focuses on the Red Sea men, the pirates that went to the Indian Ocean to attack Mughal or Muslim ships transiting between India and the Red Sea ports of Jeddah and Mocha. And then in the 1700s is when we come to the pirates that most people have heard about, you know, Blackbeard and the other pirates who prowled in the Caribbean and along the American coastline. And those are the pirates that most people think about when they think of Pirates of the Caribbean and of the Golden Age.
Yeah, unless you're in Florida where you think of Jack Sparrow.
Right. Jack Sparrow.
I think Jack Sparrow made people like pirates. We shouldn't like. I think Captain Hook. Captain Hook did the right thing, make us not like him, right?
Well, unfortunately, both of those guys are fictional. But yes, pirates have been romanticized, even going back to the early 1700s. Because think about it, in the abstract, it's kind of exciting. You just chuck everything behind, your land life. You get on board a ship with a lot of other men. You are in control of your own destiny. You can plunder at will and hopefully get rich while drinking a lot of rum. But unfortunately, other than the rum part, the real life of pirates was rather grim, and many of them ended up being hanged or being killed at sea during epic battles.
Wow. And so did most of their sinkings happen at the hands of the good guys trying to get back their gold?
Well, not so much the good guys trying to get back their gold. There aren't all that many pirate ships that sank to the bottom, and I listened to your intro. A lot of those gold doubloons and coins, especially in Florida where you are, were from sunk Spanish treasure ships that were transiting between Central America and South America and Spain, and they were loaded with precious coins that were made at the mints. And those are many of the ships that dot the coast of Florida, and that have been the foundation of some of the fortunes retrieved from the bottom of the ocean. There are only a couple of pirate ships that really sank with money on board.
Oh, okay. I guess I was misunderstanding it. But there was a place you could swim though, like snorkel over a sunken ship. And, I'm not going to say pirate this time, but do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I don't know the specific instance distance you're talking about, but yes, there are a number of ships from that era that are still at the bottom of the ocean. A lot of them would be, unless they're rather deep, would be very decayed, and there wouldn't be much left other than the hardware. But just a few miles from Vero Beach in 1715, a Spanish treasure fleet, sank during a hurricane. About 15 ships, and a huge amount of treasure went to the bottom. A lot of it was recovered, but a lot of it remained there and has been found by treasure hunters over the years.
And that really affected the commerce from the other countries.
Oh, yeah. Everybody in Europe was jealous of the Spanish treasure that was being exported out of Central and South America, and they often attacked Spanish ships trying to get it. But that money that was going back to Europe was really important in fueling Spain's rise to be one of the foremost European powers. And then the other European powers, including England, got really irritated with the pirates, especially in the late 1600s and early 1700s, when they were taking away from the British bottom line. They were attacking East Indian ships in the Indian Ocean, and then in the 1700s they were attacking American and English ships transiting the Atlantic. So they were viewed as a real threat that had to be extinguished.
And the pirates were murderers, yet they were romanticized.
Yes. Well, you know what's another fascinating thing that I discovered while working on this book is that pirates really succeeded in large because they had a terrifying brand identity. Actually, very few pirates murdered their victims. Every once in a while they would, and some of those murders are epic in the retelling, but it was only every once in a while, by refreshing their brand as these vicious ocean-going marauders, did they so scare merchant ships that were traveling the ocean that most of the ships, once they saw the Jolly Roger or the Black Flag go up the pirate's mast, would surrender rather than fight. But when they chose to fight, some of those pirates could be really brutal.
So how did you do the research for the book? I'm guessing these guys didn't exactly make their logs public.
No, I wish. Unfortunately, a lot of them ended up dead, and there are no pirate memoirs, unfortunately, but you can get a lot of information from the many trials that took place, both in England and in the colonies, for which there are trial transcripts, and depositions were taken from the pirates who were captured, who weren't killed during the battles. And there also were newspapers that started to come into being in the early 1700s, but the mother lode of information was really the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of letters written by English colonial governors and merchants and customs officials and just regular people who were monitoring, had been plundered by pirates, and they sent letters back to England, and all of those letters were saved and by the archives, and you can actually find them online, and you can search them, so you get a running commentary on how pirates were affecting the colonies and what the colonies were doing to combat pirates. So there is a lot of information, but unfortunately most of the pirates are relatively mute, especially if they were killed in battle, and no pirates that succeeded in getting away with their riches sat down to pen their epic memoir of my life as a pirate.
So, okay, the way I envision it, and I'm going to say something, and then I want you to correct everything I just said that I imagined wrong, okay? I always imagined that getting here to America from Europe was a big deal. It was like NASA sending something to Mars. And yet, if you look at all the governments behind those ships that made it here, how did a group of renegade guys do the same exact thing that the governments had to do? So, you know what I mean? It would be like me, taking my car up to Mars to stop that thing from landing today.
Well, yeah, sort of. We have to remember, back in that time, the world was much more maritime than it even is today. All of these pirates, almost all of the pirates, came with maritime or naval or privateering backgrounds. So these are men of the sea already in their late teens and 20s primarily, who knew their way around the ocean, who knew their way around a ship, and they weren't transiting between the colonies and England so much. They were basically during the winter months, going down to the Caribbean, or perhaps they were in the Indian Ocean. And then when the summer came, they would go north to plunder ships along the American coast.
Wow.
And they were good sailors, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be able to track down their prey, and they wouldn't be able to escape from those ships that were sent to take them in.
Well, there were other bad guys that were influenced by the pirates, and they pretended to be pirates so they could do their own bad stuff.
Other good guys that pretended to be pirates. I'm not sure I'm following that. But
for
maybe you're talking about
privateering. I mean,
privateering.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Privateering. Now, this is an interesting topic. Privateering is sort of licensed piracy. During times of war, a government would give a privateer, would give a merchant vessel, an armed merchant vessel, a letter of marque, which essentially gave them permission to attack the enemies of the country from which they got that letter of marque. So it's a way of amplifying your naval strength during times of war. The problem is, and this is where the connection is made, a lot of privateers actually slowly morphed into pirates, especially after a war was over and all of their letters of marque were pulled, so they no longer were legally allowed to take ships, but they had all the skills. They had been plundering ships during the war.
Wow.
And some of them decided, hey, let's stay in this line of business and become pirates.
Wow. You're listening to our guest. He's talking about pirates. His book is doing really well on Amazon. Let's see. It's called Black Flags, Blue Waters, The Epic History of America's Most Notorious Pirates. Eric J. Dolin is our guest. The book is, like I say, number 5 on Amazon. And it looks like it's a big book. 416 pages is listed here. So Robin mentioned earlier about the romantic aspect to this. So in those letters you referred to earlier, is there any, you said these guys are in their 20s or so?
Yeah, most of them.
So did the scene never happen where, the good girl likes the bad boy, and are there any of those love stories that actually survived?
Unfortunately, no. The one love story that's often brought up is Samuel Bellamy, who supposedly was in love with a woman on Cape Cod called Marie Hallett. He was a lowly sailor, and Marie's parents didn't want her to marry this lowly sailor, so he went south to dive on the Spanish wrecks off the coast of Florida. He didn't have much luck there, but he veered into piracy, and he actually plundered a huge number of ships, including the Witta, a former slave ship, which was loaded with silver and gold. And supposedly he came back. He was heading back to Cape Cod to show Marie and her parents that he had made good. He'd become a rich man. But the Witta was sunk by a nor'easter, and all that treasure and the ship and Mr. Bellamy went to the bottom right off of Cape Cod. Unfortunately, there's no evidence that there was actually ever such a love affair, or that he was going back to the Cape to reunite with this Maria Hallett. But other than that, there are really no stories of pirates having the Errol Flynn-like romance with these wealthy women ashore. More to the reality of it was in Port Royal, Jamaica, there was a brothel on every other corner, and a lot of pirates used to repair there and spend huge amounts of money. One pirate reportedly spent 500 pieces of eight just to see a woman naked, just gave her 500 pieces of eight.
Wow.
And they also, in Madagascar, off of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, there was a little island called Saint Marie, which is where the pirates repaired to when they weren't plundering in the Indian Ocean. And yes, they did often have sex with the local Malagasy women, but the Hollywood version of these, pirates with the heart of gold winning over the general's daughter, so to speak, no
stories like that, huh? So what is the story? Okay, and I should know this because I live here, but in Tampa we have this. What's it called? Gasparilla or Jasparilla?
Yes, Gasparilla. Every January.
This big deal that happens down there, and we don't live too far from there, really. Is that based on anything true?
Okay, now here I am going to have to be totally honest that Gasparilla, if in fact he is a real person, which from what I understand is highly debatable, that's outside of the scope of my book. He wasn't doing his supposed plundering in the area or during the time that I'm writing about. So I don't even mention Gasparilla in the book, and I encourage your listeners to go find some good history books that will either support those stories or render them mythical. But I can't add much to that.
The sad part is there still are pirates today that do horrendous things.
Yes, as long as people have been going on ships in the ocean with anything of value, even going back to Phoenician times, Roman times, Greek times, there were pirates, in part because of human nature. Just like there are always land thieves, there are water thieves. And yes, you're right. Today, there are Somali pirates, there are pirates in the Caribbean, off of Venezuela, in the Malacca Strait, in the Pacific Ocean. So I fear, and it's a very sad commentary, but as long as people are transiting on the ocean lanes with things of value, there will probably be pirates who are there to try to steal that stuff or take the ships hostage and hold them for ransom.
What role did Benjamin Franklin play in the ideas to handle the problem of pirating?
Actually, Benjamin Franklin, he was a young guy. He was working for his older brother in the Hartford Courant and another newspaper. He basically wrote a couple of ditties or ballads about pirates, the most famous of which was about Blackbeard, and it was just to ballyhoo the death of Blackbeard. So he wasn't really directly involved in attacking pirates, although he didn't like pirates. But unfortunately, that song about Blackbeard, even though that it sold particularly well at the time, and he talks about it in his autobiography, not a single copy of it has survived. And if you have one in your attic, that'll be a great find.
How did you manage to keep your book factual yet still interesting?
Well, I think this is my 13th book. I write popular narrative histories, and I think the way that I do it is I stick to the facts as best we know them, but also interweave it with a much broader and fascinating story about American history. I also think that my writing style is very easily accessible. It's not an academic book at all. And a lot of these stories, even though they may not be the mythical stories that you grow up seeing on TV or in the movies, they are fascinating, and there's more than enough information to tell the outlines of those stories and what the pirates did and how they affected the people they plundered and how they affected American history. And I think it's a great story. And I've gotten a lot of excellent feedback from people who have read the books who are not my relatives or friends, so I can trust what they're saying.
Is Johnny Depp's character based on a real pirate?
Not as far as I know. Keith Richards, perhaps, or Adam Ant, maybe is more along the lines. But there is some reality. That is one of the things that is not a myth. There were pirates who would dress rather outlandishly, because when they plundered ships on which there were either fancy people, sometimes they would strip them of their clothes, but also a lot of these ships had clothes and jewels and other things in trunks, and the pirates would take that and sort of a way of thumbing their nose at the society from which they were banned, they would often dress up rather garishly. So that aspect of Johnny Depp is probably more accurate than many of the other myths.
Last year on Thanksgiving, Robin and I went to eat in New York City at the Francis Tavern in Lower Manhattan, which is where George Washington and those guys used to hang out. We went there just because. And at the time, we learned that the water was up against Manhattan, like a block away. I guess the island grew. And there were a lot of ships coming in at that time in that place. Was that part of what they had to deal with, or did the pirating always happen farther out at sea?
Oh, no, the pirating usually happened not in the ports. The ports were often places where the pirates would repair to, and before 1700, there were a number of pirates that you could see walking the streets of New York, including Captain William Kidd, who actually launched his voyage from New York. He wasn't originally a pirate, but, excuse me, he veered into piracy. But there are accounts in the late 1600s of some of the meaner streets of New York at the time, of pirates wandering around, getting drunk, making a lot of noise, scandalizing the more upstanding citizens of New York, drinking in the local pubs. Yes, before 1700, pirates, especially the Red Sea pirates, the Red Sea men, were welcomed in the colonies because they were bringing back things that the colonists really wanted, treasure and East Indian goods. And even back then, the colonists sort of had a less than favorable perspective on the mother country and how they were being treated. And pirates gave them an opportunity to get the things that the mother country was starving them of, especially currency.
Where did they come from mostly? What country? What language would they have spoken?
More than 50% of the pirates that we know about were of English descent, so they would have been speaking the English of the day. But a lot of pirates were, a number of pirates were former West African slaves, so they would be speaking whatever dialect, or maybe some broken English. There were a lot of pirates who came from the Caribbean, other European nations. So a lot of pirate ships back during this time were sort of almost a United Nations. They were a conglomeration of a bunch of different nationalities.
Wow. Why our parrots always seem to be depicted with the pirate?
What's the parrot?
Well, there are a lot of pirates. The Caribbean pirates especially used to use Nassau and in the Bahamas as one of their redoubts, and there are a lot of pirates down there in tropical areas where the pirates used to go both to plunder and to relax and split their booty, and there are instances where they would take animals on board, not only to later kill and eat, but also apparently some parrots as pets or just some color on board. I did not come across any written accounts of a pirate walking the deck with a parrot on his shoulder uttering English words, but maybe that happened.
So what, and is the flag a true thing, the Jolly Roger? I mean, why would you fly a flag to advertise that you're a pirate?
Well, exactly. No, the Jolly Roger, the black flag, was absolutely real, especially in the early 1700s. It was the terrifying calling card of pirates. And the whole idea was to strike so much fear into the heart of the sailors who saw it fluttering atop the pirates' ship masts that they would surrender without fighting because they knew of the reputation that pirates had. And they said, hey, I don't want to lay down my life for the owner of the ship who's not even here for transiting this cargo or whatever else may be on board. Wow. So it was a way of telegraphing your intentions and basically getting people to surrender because of their fear of potentially being attacked and killed.
Eric, I want to thank you. You gave us a most interesting interview. Thank you for doing that. I can see why the book is selling so well. Besides Amazon, do you have a different place you want to recommend, a different website?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a website where you can read the introduction to the book and see on some of my other books. It's just my name. It's www.ericjdolin.com, and that's EricJaydolin.com. And there's a lot of fun stuff on the site about this book and other books, and I hope people go there.
I just checked out some of your other work. You're very prolific and very interesting, Eric. Thank you so much for doing this. You gave us a great segment. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You are welcome. We'll take a little break. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville.
President Trump tweets, they are not coming into the USA. Some Central American migrants in Mexico rushed the border near San Diego yesterday. Border Patrol fired tear gas. There were kids screaming and coughing.